When my aunt left me her business in her will, I stayed quiet and let everyone think I got nothing. Last week, my cousin smirked. "You should start packing. This office is mine now." I just nodded and said, "Sure. Just be here Monday." When she walked in with her lawyer, she turned pale seeing who was already sitting behind the desk. I, 32M, sat in the back row at my aunt's funeral, watching my cousin strut around like she'd already inherited the empire. She didn't even try to hide the satisfaction on her face. My aunt had built her commercial real estate firm from nothing. 30 years of grinding, negotiating, closing deals that would make most people's heads spin. She was ruthless in business, but fair. She taught me everything I know about reading contracts, spotting lies, and knowing when to stay silent. That last lesson would prove more valuable than I ever imagined. The reading of the will happened 3 days later. My cousin showed up in designer clothes, practically vibrating with anticipation. My uncle sat beside her, already mentally spending money that wasn't his yet. The extended family filled the lawyer's office, vultures circling what they assumed would be their piece of the pie. The lawyer started reading. My cousin got the house in the Hamptons. My uncle received a sizable cash payout. Various relatives got stocks, bonds, and jewelry. When my name was called, I was bequeathed a single item, my aunt's vintage desk clock from her office. The room erupted in barely suppressed laughter. My cousin actually smirked at me across the table. I took the news with a straight face, nodded politely, and left without a word. Let them think what they wanted. What none of them knew was that 2 years before her death, my aunt had transferred ownership of her entire business to me through a separate trust. The company, the buildings, the contracts, the commercial properties worth north of $40 million. All of it. She'd structured it carefully with her personal attorney, completely separate from her estate will. The business had never been part of her estate to begin with. She'd called me into her office on a Tuesday afternoon and explained her reasoning. My cousin had worked at the firm for 6 months before quitting, claiming the work was beneath her. My uncle had borrowed money from my aunt 3 times and never repaid a cent. The rest of the family only showed up when they needed something. I'd been working alongside my aunt since college, learning every aspect of the business, staying late, handling the difficult clients she didn't have time for. She made me promise not to tell anyone until after she was gone. She wanted to see who would show their true colors when they thought they were getting something. She also wanted me protected from the inevitable fighting that would break out. The trust was ironclad, filed with the state, completely legal and separate from her will. I kept working at the firm like nothing had changed. Technically, I was already the owner, but the transition paperwork wouldn't be finalized in public until 30 days after her death. I showed up, did my job, and watched my cousin prance around the office like she owned it. She started making changes immediately, told the longtime office manager that her services wouldn't be needed much longer, rearranged my aunt's office, boxing up personal items without asking anyone. She brought in an interior designer to discuss renovations. She hadn't inherited the business, but she assumed she would, and that was enough for her to start acting like a tyrant. The staff came to me quietly, worried about their jobs. I told them to sit tight and trust me. They'd known me for years and seemed relieved, though confused about why I wasn't more concerned. 2 weeks after the funeral, my cousin cornered me in the break room. She asked when I'd be clearing out my office since she'd need the space for her new management team. I told her I hadn't made any plans yet. She laughed and said I might want to start looking for new opportunities since she'd be restructuring the entire company. I just nodded and went back to my coffee. 3 weeks in, she called a staff meeting without telling me, announced that under her leadership, there would be significant changes to commission structures and client assignments. Several of our best agents looked ready to walk out. I caught their eyes and gave a small shake of my head. They stayed, barely. Last Monday, she showed up at my office door with her lawyer. She informed me that the transition period was over and I should start packing my things. She'd already had new business cards printed with her name as CEO. She wanted me out by the end of the week. I looked up from my computer and asked her if she was sure about the timeline. She said she was certain, even seemed annoyed that I'd question it. Her lawyer stood behind her with a folder full of documents, ready to make it official. I told her that was fine, but she should probably come back Monday morning with her lawyer. We could handle everything then. She asked why we couldn't do it right now. I said Monday would work better for everyone involved. She gave me that same smirk from the funeral and agreed. Told me to have my desk cleared and be ready to hand over all client files and passwords. That weekend, I made some calls. Got everything lined up exactly the way my aunt would have wanted. Monday morning arrived. I got to the office at 6, 3 hours before anyone else. The real estate trust attorney was already waiting in the conference room with all the documentation. The company's corporate lawyer arrived next, followed by our accountant. By 8:30, we had everything set up. My cousin walked in at 9 with her lawyer and my uncle. She'd brought him for moral support, I guess. Maybe intimidation. They headed straight for my aunt's old office, the big corner one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. I was sitting behind the desk. My cousin stopped in the doorway. Her face went from confident to confused to angry in about 3 seconds. She demanded to know what I was doing in her office. I gestured to the chairs across from the desk and suggested she and her lawyer sit down. Her lawyer started talking about the will and the inheritance and proper procedures. I let him finish, then slid a folder across the desk. Told him he might want to look at page 3. He opened it. His face changed immediately. Started reading more carefully. Flipped back to the first page, then to page 3 again. My cousin asked what it was. He told her to give him a minute. The silence stretched out. My uncle kept looking between his daughter and the lawyer, trying to figure out what was happening. My cousin's confidence was cracking. She asked again what the document was. Her lawyer finally looked up and explained that the business had been transferred to me 2 years prior through an irrevocable trust. The company was never part of my aunt's estate. My aunt hadn't owned it when she died. I did. My cousin's face went completely white. She started arguing that it wasn't possible, that her mother wouldn't have done that there must be some mistake. I opened my laptop and showed her the filed documents, complete with state seals and timestamps. Showed her the bank accounts, all in my name. The property deeds, transferred 18 months ago. The corporate registration, updated before my aunt even got sick. Her lawyer was reading through everything, and I could see him realizing how thorough my aunt had been. Every possible legal challenge had been anticipated and blocked. The trust was designed by one of the best estate attorneys in the state. There was no ambiguity, no loophole, no way to contest it. My uncle started yelling, called my aunt ungrateful, called me a manipulator, said I'd tricked his sister into signing away her legacy. I stayed calm and reminded him that my aunt had been perfectly sound of mind 2 years ago, that she'd made this decision long before her illness, and that multiple doctors and lawyers had certified her competency at the time of transfer. My cousin tried a different approach, said we could work together, that she'd been preparing to run the business, that she had ideas for expansion. I reminded her that she'd quit after 6 months and called the work beneath her. Mentioned that she'd told my aunt the clients were too demanding and the hours too long. My aunt had documented everything. Her lawyer advised her to leave. Told her there was no legal basis for any claim against the business. My uncle refused to go quietly, started threatening lawsuits and family consequences. I picked up my phone and called building security. As they were being escorted out, my cousin turned back and screamed that I'd stolen her inheritance. I told her she'd gotten exactly what my aunt wanted her to have, a house she could sell and money she could spend. But the business, the thing my aunt had built with her own hands, went to someone who actually valued it. The office was silent after they left. The staff had heard everything. I called an all-hands meeting for that afternoon and explained the situation properly. Showed them the documentation, assured them their jobs were secure, and told them that nothing about how we operated would change. Several people actually applauded. Update 1. The next 2 weeks were chaos. My uncle hired 3 different lawyers. Each one reviewed the trust documents and told him the same thing. Airtight. My cousin started calling other family members, trying to rally support for some kind of intervention. Most of them were smart enough to stay out of it once they understood the legal reality. My uncle's second wife called me, crying, begging me to at least give them a percentage of the business. Said they'd been counting on that inheritance, that they had debts to pay. I asked her how much my uncle owed in gambling debts this time. She hung up. The real problem came when my cousin started contacting our clients directly. She sent emails claiming there was a dispute over company ownership, that the business might be unstable, suggesting they might want to consider other firms for their needs. It was a scorched earth attempt to damage what she couldn't have. I had our lawyer send her a cease and desist. She ignored it. Sent more emails. Called clients on the phone. One of our biggest accounts, a property development group we'd worked with for 15 years, called me directly to ask what was happening. I met with them in person. Brought documentation showing clear ownership. Showed them our financial stability. Introduced them to our senior agents who'd been handling their properties for years. Explained that a disgruntled family member was trying to cause problems, but had no legal standing or connection to the company. They appreciated the transparency and signed a new 5-year contract on the spot. My cousin's interference actually backfired. Other clients heard about the situation, called to verify stability, and ended up signing longer contracts because they were impressed with how professionally we handled the crisis. Our corporate lawyer documented every instance of her contact with clients, building a case for tortious interference. 3 weeks after the office confrontation, my cousin showed up at a property showing I was conducting for a major client. Just walked right into the commercial space like she belonged there, started telling the client that the deal wasn't secure because of ownership issues with the firm. I excused myself, called building security and our lawyer simultaneously, had her removed from the property, and served with a restraining order within 2 hours. The client was mortified on my behalf and impressed by the swift response. Made an offer on the property that same day. My uncle tried one last approach, emotional manipulation. Showed up at my apartment on a Sunday morning, without my cousin, claiming he just wanted to talk. Said his sister would have wanted family to stay together. Said I was tearing the family apart over money. I invited him in and made coffee. Let him say his piece. Then I reminded him of 3 specific instances where he'd borrowed money from my aunt and never paid it back. Mentioned the time he'd tried to convince her to invest in his friend's pyramid scheme. Brought up the year he'd missed Christmas because he was too busy with his new wife's family, but showed up 2 weeks later asking for a loan. I told him my aunt had been very clear about why she structured things the way she did. She loved her family, but she knew the difference between people who loved her and people who loved what she could give them. She'd spent 30 years building something that mattered, and she wanted it in the hands of someone who would protect it, not liquidate it for a quick payout. He left without finishing his coffee. Update 2. 2 months after everything went down, things finally stabilized. My cousin's lawyer bills apparently exceeded what she could afford to keep fighting a case she couldn't win. The harassment stopped. The family split into clear camps. Those who understood why my aunt made the choice she did, and those who thought I should have volunteered to split everything anyway. I didn't lose sleep over the second group. The business thrived. Turned out that my aunt's old clients loved the continuity of leadership and the fact that someone who actually understood her vision was running things. We closed 4 major deals in 8 weeks. Revenue was up 23% over the same period last year. I found something while going through my aunt's personal effects that the family had boxed up from her office. A letter, dated 3 years ago, sealed in an envelope with my name on it. My hands shook while opening it. She'd written it right after her initial diagnosis, before she'd transferred the business to me. She explained that she'd always known who really cared about her work and who saw it as a meal ticket. She'd tested my cousin multiple times, giving her opportunities to step up, to show real interest in the business beyond the money it generated. My cousin had failed every test. The letter described specific instances I'd forgotten about. Times I'd stayed late to help my aunt prep for difficult negotiations. Weekends I'd spent researching zoning laws for a complicated deal. The way I'd handled a client crisis when my aunt was in the hospital and couldn't be reached. She'd been watching everything. She wrote that she knew her decision would cause family drama. She'd made peace with that. What mattered to her was that her life's work continued in capable hands, that the employees who'd been loyal to her would be protected, and that the clients who trusted her would be taken care of properly. The last paragraph made me cry. She thanked me for being the kind of person who loved the work itself, not just the rewards it brought. She said she'd been proud of me since the day I'd asked to learn the business instead of asking for a job. She knew I'd face opposition, but she also knew I was strong enough to handle it. I framed the letter and hung it in my office, right above the vintage desk clock she'd left me in the will. That clock had been on her desk since she'd opened her first office 30 years ago. Everyone thought it was a pittance, a throwaway inheritance. They didn't realize it was a symbol. She'd given me her time, her knowledge, her business, and her trust. The clock was just a reminder. My cousin tried to show up at our annual client appreciation event last month. Security turned her away at the door per the restraining order. She stood outside for 20 minutes, watching through the windows as I gave a speech about my aunt's legacy and the company's future. I saw her crying. Part of me felt bad. The rest of me remembered her smirking at the funeral. Last week, I got a letter from her lawyer. Not a legal threat this time. A request. She wanted to sell the Hamptons house my aunt had left her, but the real estate market there was brutal. She was asking if our firm would represent her in the sale, professional courtesy, family discount. I had our corporate lawyer respond. We'd be happy to take the listing at our standard commercial rate, no family discount. We'd assign our most junior agent to handle it, same as any other client. The sale proceeds would be her business. The commission would be ours. She accepted. The house listed last Tuesday. Will probably close within 60 days. My aunt would have appreciated the irony. The extended family still doesn't talk to me at gatherings, but I've made peace with that. I kept my aunt's business alive, protected her employees, and honored the trust she placed in me. That matters more than awkward holiday dinners. Last night, I stayed late at the office, something I've done countless times over the years. I sat at my aunt's old desk, now my desk, and looked out at the city lights. Thought about that Tuesday afternoon when she'd called me in and changed my life. Remembered her exact words when I'd asked why she was trusting me with everything. She'd said that legacy wasn't about blood. It was about values. About finding someone who understood that success wasn't just about making money. It was about building something that lasted, something that mattered. She'd spent years looking for that person in her family, and when she found it, she made sure it was protected. The desk clock ticked steadily behind me, the same rhythm it had kept for 30 years. My phone buzzed with an email, another major client signing a long-term contract. Our best quarter in company history. I smiled and got back to work. My aunt had built something worth protecting, and I wasn't going to let her down.